Franklin Ask. We're here in Santa Clara for our Editors' Days. In the studio with me now is Andrew Atkinson from Cloud Cruiser. Andrew, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So, a lot of people doing lots of things in the cloud. That's
Yes.
about as vague a statement as I could possibly make. When it comes to enterprises, though, there's often a lot of question as to who's doing what and how much they're doing and how do you control it,
Right.
how do you control costs and things like that. How are you helping enterprises handle those types of situations?
Well, Cloud Cruiser is essentially a smart meter for your cloud resources. So we track usage, attach it to users, put costs against it, so you can figure out who's using how much of what and what it's costing you. And our customers use this sometimes for financial metrics, to actually figure out what's costing what. How much does this department costing us? Mm-hmm. But often it's also for usage metrics, operational metrics. What level of resource do I need for this department or this project or this cost center? How close am I to my capacities in terms of what I've got available? How can I better plan for the future by looking at past history and figuring out how levels of usage have changed over time? So it's, there's always that fundamental problem of how do you manage what you can't measure? So you have to measure it in order to be able to manage
Right.
it. And ideally, you need to be able to measure it in a way using metrics that are meaningful to the business in some way. So, essentially, when you're talking about measuring cloud resources, cloud utilization, you're looking at things like virtual machine utilization rates, you're looking at memory utilization rates. You've got a whole lot of IT data that isn't going to be particularly meaningful to the business without having some stuff done to it first. So, essentially what we do is we take that IT data and turn it into business meaning so that the IT folks are better able to provide their services to the business, which actually, is fundamentally what they're there to do, right? It's all about enabling the business, that they are able to provide those services with agility, clarity, and control. People often go to the cloud initially for cost-saving reasons, but many people have found over time that really the agility provided to the organization by access to cloud resources is at least as important as those cost savings.
So it sounds almost like there's two different targets or target customers within an enterprise, depending on whether you're looking at the cost side or the capacity side for the IT manager, for instance. Which do you target within an enterprise, or do you actually speak to both of them?
We actually will speak to both of them, and usually at some point you're talking to both of them. We actually primarily are talking to the line of business folks initially.
Okay.
We're talking to the people on the business side, and particularly when you're dealing with cloud, you're often dealing with situations where because it's easy to slap down a credit card and spin up an instance on AWS or Azure.
Yeah.
You have what's sometimes referred to as shadow IT, or you have
Sure.
line of business folks accessing IT resources in the cloud. And what we help the IT operations folks do is get a handle on what's going on throughout the organization, so you can see all of the different utilization. You can find efficiencies that way. And in particular, we have the ability to do that across multi-clouds. So, not just a single source. Because any of the providers will give you essentially a bill, but it can be very difficult to get useful information out of that bill. So what we'll do is we'll take the information from the different cloud providers, we'll normalize that information to make it comparable across providers. So you can essentially do apples-to-apples comparisons, even if you're starting off with lemons and badgers. And again, turn that IT data into business meaning and better enable the business to effectively use those cloud resources.
So you mentioned the idea of shadow IT. How do you pull in data from some of those users that are maybe using either unsanctioned or unregistered cloud resources or cloud services?
Mm-hmm. Well, in general, somebody winds up having to pay the bill, right? So those
Sure.
users are not doing it on their own nickel.
Right.
So at some point they're going to say, well, okay, I want to be reimbursed for this.
Okay.
At that point, you get access to the account information, and you can consolidate all of those disparate accounts and get a single picture of it. So you can be looking at a bunch of different accounts in a bunch of different parts of the organization, and get a single unitary, holistic view of everything that's going on. And that can lead to tremendous increases in the efficiency of the usage of resources. when you have the whole picture rather than just bits and pieces of it.
What's changing around cloud utilization, and maybe more importantly, what's changing at Cloud Cruiser that allows you to handle the change in the environment?
Well, there are two very exciting things that are going on. Within the development of the market itself, I live in a surfing town, so I will sometimes use a surfing metaphor. And there's a point when you're surfing where the wave starts to pick you up and kick you forward, and that's where we are in the development of the cloud market right now. You have to paddle like hell for a while to get to that point, and we've been doing that. But we are now at the point where there's tremendous uptake in the market. Verizon released a report. I saw it today. It may have been released today. It may have been released in the last couple of days, talking about the how cloud usage in the enterprise is now a thing,
right.
And that not only are people using cloud, but they are even changing their business processes to take advantage of the capabilities that cloud provides. So we've gotten to sort of that next level of utilization where people are seeing how they can use these capabilities in new and interesting ways to advance their businesses. Not just kind of doing little experiments. Cloud Cruiser's been around for 5 years, and in the early years, you had a lot of people sort of kicking tires and looking at cloud, and the question was, should I be in the cloud, or what is cloud? And over time, those questions morphed more to, when should I be in the cloud? And now it's more, how should I be in the cloud? How can I most effectively use the cloud? How much cloud should I use? And these are the kinds of questions that we can help them answer. So there's a level of maturity in the market that's very exciting. I mean, we really are at that point where that wave is picking us up. And as people are using cloud more broadly, you do have this need to measure that utilization.
Right.
It's a bit like with if you're not measuring your resource, you're going to use too much of it, or you're not going to use it efficiently. You might discover you're not even using enough in those places where it gives you a real benefit. So one analogy we like to use is a water meter. If you don't have a water meter, you're probably going to use too much water, or you might use water. If you're a farmer, you might use water in a field where you don't need it, and you might not be using enough in another field where more investment would, more resource would really benefit you. And part of what we help our users do is identify which fields they ought to be watering the most. The other thing, too, is that you can alter user behavior just by making them aware of what they're doing. They may not have any awareness of what their actual utilization is. So in some cases, companies will do chargeback, where they're actually literally charging divisions or departments with the cost of their IT usage. More often, we actually see that people just want to give those users information about what it is that they're doing, and you can alter their behavior that way. In the case of my hometown, we've had water rationing for the last 2 years. We have a terrible drought here in California. And there's a cap on household usage of water levels. You exceed that cap, it's a $500 fine, and you have to go to water school, which is like traffic school, but for water. So nobody wants to do that. So people became very adept at reading their water meters and altering their behavior in response. So I have a household with 2 teenagers, both of whom now take Navy showers because they want to minimize that number. They want to be well under that cap. They don't want anything to do with water school. Same thing in an IT kind of setting. You can get people to better understand what it is that they're doing when they're, spinning up these resources, and you can identify which projects are giving you a return on that IT investment. So that's just sort of the long-winded answer about the big picture kind of market view. Specific to Cloud Cruiser, we do have a very interesting development in that the next generation of our product, which we're calling Cloud Cruiser 16, is going to be available very soon. Early part of December this year. And it vastly increases the speed at which you can get access to information. You can. It's much easier to implement. It's a full SaaS product, so really just sort of enter some credentials, and pretty soon you're looking at really useful information in terms that are meaningful to the business. There's tremendous power within the product to do very granular levels of permission, so people just see what they need to see. They don't get overwhelmed with information that they don't care about. And also the ability to create some very, very powerful reports, even from the perspective of users self-authoring those reports. So some tremendous reporting capabilities. And some really interesting intelligence built into the product itself, so that For example, you are provided with insights into where you're using resource effectively, where you're not using resource effectively. There are health checks within the system, so you can monitor the health of your IT systems and of the product itself. So it's some very cool stuff, and we're very excited about that.
So it really sounds like just a lot more utilization of the data that's available to benefit the enterprise, to be able to allow them to operate more efficiently, more effectively, and save costs if possible.
That's right. Yeah, it's the cost savings are critical, as is the increased agility you get by knowing who's using how much of what, and
right.
Whether you need more of it, and whether they're using that resource effectively. Tremendous increase in information. Again, we give folks the ability to measure that usage, to attach it to users, put costs against it, so they can figure out who's using how much of what and what it's costing them, and that way they can more effectively manage their business.
Excellent. Well, Andrew, fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Oh, thanks very much for having us.